everybody. Welcome back to How Come. Oh, this is the penultimate episode of season 3, which means the second to last. I learned that word in like 9th grade. Very proud of myself for remembering it. Second to last episode, which means next episode is going to be congratulations. So if you had a congratulations story, you came for the first time, or in a new way because of this podcast, send that story our way via DM on Instagram, either to me at Remy Casimir or at How Come Podcast. And we will either read it on the show, or we might even contact you and have you call in on the show and tell us about your first time, like we have in past seasons. If you haven't heard those episodes, go back, listen to season 1 and season 2. Congratulations. They are so good. And super international. So many people around the world, just coming all over the world. This episode is going to be about a different thing that starts with the letters CU. Talking about cults. Cults have become like a popular thing to talk about. And my friend Brooke Arnold, she is a stand-up comedian. She is amazing. Professor, writer, and podcaster. She is launching a weekly show on YouTube in the next few weeks. So subscribe to her YouTube channel and see the first episode when it drops. But yeah, Brooke grew up in a cult and escaped from it, and now does all these amazing things that I just mentioned. And so we're going to hear about her experience in that and how she got out of what's been called the world's most woman-hating cult. Pretty big trigger warning on this episode. There is a lot of sexual abuse, rape mentioned, psychological manipulation, and misuse of trust. So brace yourselves for that. And in that same arena, I was doing the DM reads that I've been doing live on Instagram the other day, reading the ones that we haven't gotten to, and some really old DMs populated. And we had received a message about a former team member that is very concerning, and we obviously believe the person who came in and told us. That team member had already been let go a long time ago for different reasons. Some episodes I might edit them out, some I might just take those episodes down. I'd rather not do that with some of them because they are really great episodes that I want people to be able to hear and learn from. So I'm still deciding with some of them. But yeah, so we've removed their handles from episodes that they appear on. Any further concerns, please reach out to us always. We are also going to be taking down an episode because of an accusation against a guest. We're not going to mention which one. We don't want any more attention again or people going to these people. So that's how we're going to handle that. But this episode is going to be fantastic. Brooke is one of the most inspiring people that I have talked to. She's also a really hilarious comedian, so we have a really good laugh about some really serious stuff. But again, if you're in a sensitive place, maybe not the time to listen to it. Or if you are the type that you love murder podcasts and you love cult documentaries and that's your thing, then this is the episode for you. You're going to have a really fun time. But seriously, it's very interesting, and I honestly had a blast recording it. We did have a lot of technical difficulties, but it was still so fun because Brooke is so fun. And if you want to see any of those, go head over to patreon.com/howcome. You can see the full unedited video. We're basically in the dark the whole time. Brooke's power went out at one point for like a full 10 minutes. So yeah, go check that out if you'd like. It's only $5 a month to join Patreon, and you get to see so much. This episode of How Come is brought to you by Care of, with your customized vitamin plan that helps you feel your best today and supports you long term. For 50% off your first Care of order, visit takecareof.com and enter promo code HowCome50. That is takecareof.com and enter promo code HowCome50. Big shout out today to Allform. Helix has gone beyond the bedroom, started making sofas, and just launched a new company called Allform. They're making premium, customizable sofas and chairs shipped right to your door. To find your perfect sofa and get 20% off all orders, go to allform.com/howcome. Okay, let's start this episode. I can't wait.
How come? How come? How come I can't achieve? How come I can't achieve? I'm rolling up my sleeves. I'm rolling up my sleeves. Oh baby, I believe these guests can help. 'Cause I can't do it by myself. I wanna just...
Yeah, hi, Brooke.
I made it. Hello, friend.
Oh my God, hello, friend. Oh, wait, I have to
Let me
turn
start
my
this
recording
video.
on.
Okay. Hi.
Well, how are you?
I'm good. I've been in Oregon this whole time. Where have you been?
I'm still in the city.
How is it?
It's different, you know. There's like parts of it that are kind of like a Wild West, you know, like everyone's drinking on the streets and going crazy, you know. But then it's also like all the stores are boarded up and everything's shut down. Like half of the bars and restaurants are shut down. So like everything is, really deeply
It's
sad.
really sad. And like,
Yeah.
nobody's helping, which is interesting.
Which is even worse.
Yeah, which is interesting. Like every day I feel like I learn something about our country that is bad that I just like took as like, oh, that happens everywhere. That's bad everywhere. And like last episode was about healthcare and stuff. And we were talking about how bad it is here. And I was just like, oh, yeah, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. And then we made this story about like, oh, like, do you guys have similar issues? And all the international people are like, no. Like, I've gone to the hospital like 7 times this year and I have no bills, or like I had to pay like 60 pounds or something. And I was just like, oh, so we're the batshit ones.
Yeah, we're the really, it's all of the like fissures of American society, all the little cracks in American society have become like these huge, like looming chasms in the last year, you know. They were always present, but maybe not so as noticeable to everybody.
Yeah, or we were just talking, like, Americans are so insulated. It's almost like a cult, like, good segue, but that we, like, literally think, like, if you didn't grow up exactly like us, like, you're the weird one. Like, we're the ones that don't speak other languages. We're the ones who are, like, other cultures are, like, strange.
Oh, hold on. Let me turn my ringer off.
Put her on airplane mode just so she can chill. Robin, I turned on Do Not Disturb.
My friend wants me to come out and smoke a joint with her.
Right now? Oh my God, I want to let you do that, but we don't have a backup episode, so you have to stay.
All right, let's come.
Let's come.
I haven't come in such a long time.
Is that true? Why?
It's really true. Because I had to move during the pandemic because of the pandemic, and I didn't bring any of my stuff with me, and I just don't want to go back ask my ex-boyfriend if I could go by his house just to be like, can I get a couple of my vibrators to take?
Were you guys living together?
Yeah, we were living together.
Okay. Well, I'll get you some new stuff.
All right.
Yeah, no, that's unacceptable. You can't be like cumless in a pandemic. That's ridiculous.
It's been pretty bad, man.
Sounds horrible.
Got kicked out of my apartment. I don't have a vibrator, and I haven't had an orgasm since.
No, that's not acceptable. You're doing so many nice things for other people. Like, you need to do some Brooke love too. You guys, what a guest we have this week. I'm so excited for this episode. Welcome, Brooke Arnold.
Thanks. I'm so happy to be here.
So I feel like cults have really become a very popular thing that people like to learn about on Netflix and in podcasts or whatever. Like,
it's not really my wheelhouse. And a lot of those people are not watching them from their own experience. It's just a completely, like, I don't want to say entertaining, but it is like kind of from an entertainment perspective. And I wanted to talk to you because you actually grew up most of your young life in a cult
Yeah.
and escaped.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever watch cult documentaries?
I do. Yeah, I do. I'm not like the one documentary I couldn't watch. It was too. I hate the word triggering because it's so mechanistic and dehumanizing. It's like, oh, you're a wounded machine that just goes off, rather than being like, I'm a human being who's reacting to this this thing that's upsetting. But then what I
The word triggered comes with the tone of a guy going, triggered.
triggered, I can't take it.
But
the one cult, it's not really a cult documentary, maybe it is, that really upset me was Jesus Camp. I started hyperventilating about a minute into it, and I've never watched it. But most cult documentaries, I find them more interesting because, like, I really like to watch. I used to really like to watch there was like a TLC show, I think, about Mormon polygamists. And I liked that show because it was kind of like, oh, it's so close to it was kind of close to what we did, but different enough that it wasn't scary. So it was like, they had that familiar comfort without being, but yeah. I actually watched I watched all the Duggars episodes earlier this year during lockdown, which was incredibly horrible for my brain, but incredibly horrible for my brain. But I do like cult documentaries. I haven't seen the new, that new one, what's it called? The Vow, I think.
The Vow, yeah. I haven't watched it, but I watched the one on Jonestown just because it's so, everybody knows about it.
Yeah.
And it's like the biggest cult massacre, so I had to know about that one. Manson I looked into just because of, what was that movie with Brad Pitt about Hollywood?
Oh, Once Upon a Time in
Once
Hollywood.
Upon a Time in Hollywood, yeah.
Yeah.
I mentioned that.
I like Manson. I've always been interested in him. I read Helter Skelter when I was a teenager. I got it at a garage sale.
Oh my god! And you were like, "This is
familiar."
Familiar.
Yeah, I remember I watched an episode of Star Trek. I think The Next Generation or Deep Space Nine. I don't remember which one. At my grandma's house when I was like 12, and the subplot was this planet of religious freaks who were like not allowing their children to go to the school on the spaceship.
And you were like,
I was like, we're the
what?
I was like, we're the bad guys.
Yeah.
I'm in the wrong. Fuck. I'm on the wrong team.
Yeah. It's like when another country tells you about American history and you're like, well, we don't sound very nice. What was the cult that you were a part of called again?
It's called the Institute in Basic Life Principles. It has a really kind of obnoxiously non-descriptive name.
Right. it's like calling like a secretary an executive assistant. It's like, what is that?
Yeah, it's like it's the logistical operations manager.
And that one is based in God, or like what are the theories that they're trying to sell?
So it's a form of like fundamentalist Christianity, and it kind of got its start. The leader would go around to all these evangelical churches across the country, and he gives like a 7-day seminar on the 7 non-optional basic principles of life.
Okay.
I love that he includes that they're non-optional.
Non-optional. This is not a la carte. This is not an a la carte cult. It's all-inclusive cult. This is the Club Med cult.
Right? And so you go to the seminar, he would advertise it in churches and stuff. So you go to the seminar for, 7 days, and you basically kind of get indoctrinated into this belief system. And then at the end of the week, he sells you a homeschool curriculum. And so he's like, take your kids out of school and raise them in the with the 7 non-optional basic principles. And those are like, let's see, their design is the first one, which basically
Okay.
means everything about you is designed by God. And so you shouldn't resent anything about yourself. And it's typical, like cults do a lot of love bombing. And so that's the first day, is this like kind of beautiful experience where anything
Ooh.
that you might feel bad about yourself, he asks you to thank God for it. And so you kind of, you know, you get this like kind of more open
It's like a
space.
high. You feel better and
Right.
like accepted and shit.
Yeah. And then he stands on the stage with a like a projection board, and he does just kind of a PowerPoint slide type thing. I guess it was a projector back in the 80s and 90s. And and you're supposed to write down everything that he says, and so that's like one of the ways that they get you to like stop, like you turn off your critical thinking skills because you're just like obsessively trying to make sure that you capture everything that's being said. Of course, it's just a trick, because at the end of the week they give you a book with all the info in it. So it's just kind of a distractionary tactic, like meant to like make you not think like, hey, this is kind of really fucked up what he's saying here. So the first principle is design. The second principle is authority, which means that it's kind of basically a hierarchical, patriarchal chain of command. That's God, and then Mr. Gothard, the creator of the program, of course.
That name, we have to address the name.
Bill Gothard.
And spelled out that says what?
Bill got hard.
Hate that. Jesus Christ.
It took me like 15 years to figure that out, and like 20 to laugh at it.
Oh my God, I can't. Yeah. So, and where does he rank in the hierarchy?
He's right beneath God.
Right beneath God. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's the direct mouth and ear to God, or like
right.
connection.
And so there's a belief that only men can be in the chain of command. So women can't actually communicate with God at all. And so you're reliant on your father or your husband or Mr. Gothard to communicate with God for you. And so there's this idea that if you stay underneath, he calls it the umbrella of authority.
Yeah.
Nothing bad can happen to you. So if you always are instantly and enthusiastically obedient to the men in your life, then nothing bad will happen to you. But if at any time you disobey, then you've taken yourself out from under your umbrella of protection, and all hell can break loose.
You have somebody that you directly respond to, and then anybody who's in the hierarchy above you, you also respond to, and have to like listen to anything they say. Yeah.
And so, there's probably the most important principle is the principle of authority. So it has this very authoritarian bent to it. Another way that people refer to cults, I guess the more politically correct way to refer to them now, is a high control group, which I like that description, because it kind of gets at what the real
what the
defining
situation is.
Yeah, what the real defining factor of a cult is versus, the kind of stereotype that we have in our mind of like Charles Manson or David Koresh.
Or even like the more like coolified way of being like, oh my God, like we're a cult. Like we're like a group, like we think the same thing or whatever. It's like, no, like that's not a cult. Like you're not being controlled by something that is like threatening your life.
Yeah, and so like we very much were taught that Satan is real, demons are real, and so if you get out from one of the things that you're opening yourself up to if you disobey is demonic attacks, and so there were a lot of like exorcisms being performed on people, kids, who are struggling with mental health issues, or just being in this really, really controlled, really isolated environment. Whenever you struggled with that, it was seen as a demon versus a natural response to the horrors around you.
Were your parents, because like it seems like there's a lot of religion interwoven with this one specifically, and I think with a lot of other cults too. Again, this is not like my area of expertise at all, but was he preying on people who were specifically religious already? Because I know you guys joined, like you were already 7, right?
Mm-hmm.
So were they already church-going people?
We weren't for like the first 7 years of my life. Like
Mhm.
I had never heard, I'd never stepped inside of a church.
Mhm.
And then my parents got saved at some point and we started going to church.
Mhm.
And then we went to the seminar and started homeschooling, and we started going to a church that was exclusively people who were also in Mr. Gothard's homeschool program.
Mhm.
So it was kind of this descent into madness, like the kind of like heart of darkness versus kind of
Mhm.
being born into it. And I was
Yeah.
fortunate in the sense that I was old enough then to clearly remember my life prior
Yeah.
to the change.
Yeah.
But kind of unfortunate in the sense that seven's still like a young enough age that it really had a really profound impact on my psyche and the way that I see the world and the way that I see myself in a way I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully undo.
Mhm. Totally. And like I don't know if this is a fair question because you were so young and maybe you don't have the answer, but like you were brought into the cult because you were a child. You know, it wasn't
Hmm.
something in your life that was going on. Is there something that you think your parents were going through that made them more susceptible to this
I,
type of thing?
I think like economic woes,
Mhm.
when Ronald Reagan deregulated the construction industry in the mid 80s, my dad lost his job,
Mhm.
and so we lost our home and our cars, and the religion kind of happened when we kind of got destitute.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, that makes sense because you're
Hmm.
looking for something to save you,
Hmm.
basically. Especially when you feel like you've got like nothing else. And
Hmm.
and you have a little child that like depends on you. Um I don't like them for bringing you into the cult.
They're
But
not my favorite people.
yeah. I don't I'm trying to understand. But okay, so let's get back to these 7 non-optional life principles.
All right, so we got design, we've got
Yep.
authority.
Mhm.
The third one is suffering.
Oh, is this a
Um,
Jewish cult? No, I'm just kidding.
and so basically, we're all called to suffer for righteousness. So the more that you suffer, the more holy you become.
Mm.
And it's also kind of intertwines with the authority principle, and so that your authority figures are supposed to make you suffer. So
Oh.
there's like always these illustrations of like God is a hand holding a hammer, and the dad's the hammer, and the
Mhm.
mom's a chisel, and the kid is a diamond, and so
Oh
it's
my
like God is
god.
like beating down through your parents on you. So
Uh-huh.
there's like a lot of tacit abuse um, encouraged by
Right.
by the teachings.
Oh god.
Yeah. So this, let's see, design, authority, suffering, ownership, which is the principle that you have no rights. And so if you don't own anything, including any ownership of yourself,
Mhm.
you belong to God. And so there's this whole teaching about how you have to yield your rights. So whenever you feel like your expectations aren't being met or your rights are being infringed upon, you're supposed to yield those to God.
So anytime something's going wrong, you're supposed to see it as this is making me a stronger, better person and a more God like more loved by God.
Yeah, I guess maybe not more loved by God, but
No, cuz you don't deserve that.
yeah, no. There's no love. There's no love in
Okay.
the cult. Like that's an interesting thing to me. Like there's no that's not a concept that really existed in their ideology. Um so it's like the idea of like yielding your rights too is about the if you feel like you don't want to follow the program, right? Like you don't want
Mhm.
to wear the long dresses, or you don't want to if you want to use birth control, or you want to get a job if you're a woman, or go to school, like if you're being homeschooled, then it's that's rebellion in your heart. You're not yielding to your authority figures enough.
Mhm. I've heard you state that they not kind of, basically were grooming techniques for young girls to be ready to be taken advantage of or just have stuff that was done to them that they didn't want.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you can see kind of how much you can see the kind of parallels between some of the non-optional principles in rape culture. You know, this idea that you have to be instantly obedient, that you have
Mm-hmm.
no ownership over yourself, that
Mm-hmm.
you know you're responsible for everything that happens to you. There's a lot of kind of things there in there already, but Bill
And
Gothard,
that
of course,
suffering is part of it.
and suffering
Like
is part of
if
it, right?
an abuse is or an assault is happening to you, and you're thinking, okay, suffering is part of it. Like basically what they're saying is, yeah, rape is getting you closer to godliness.
Right. And there's a specific teaching in Wisdom Booklet 36 that's, you know, there's a whole section on specifically on rape. And they teach in that section that's what Mr. Gothard calls the law of crying out. And so that if you don't scream and call out for help while you're being assaulted, that you're
Mm-hmm.
equally to blame with your as your assailant. Um,
What?
Yeah,
So
so this is
he
what I learned. This is
so
what I learned in my Christian homeschool program.
yeah.
You know, parents should read school materials before they give them to their children. My parents never even like
You don't
looked
think
at the
they read
material.
them? Oh my
Oh, I know they
God.
didn't. They just gave them. I know that. I know for a fact they didn't. You know. You know, and so the way that they're set up, so there's 52 booklets, each is based on a verse from the sermon, Jesus's Sermon on the Mount. And
Mhm.
so all of the knowledge
Quote unquote.
that's quote unquote, right, that's
Mhm.
in them is like extrapolated from the verse. So it'll say the first verse is, and Jesus went into the mountain and saw the multitudes. So for the math section of Wisdom Booklet number 1, you look at little drawings of crowds and then you estimate how many people are in the,
How many multitudes?
how many
I
multitudes,
think
right?
Trump would like this book.
I never,
We
you
have
know,
the
like I said,
biggest multitudes.
they're huge.
Huge.
But each wisdom booklet starts off with a wisdom quiz.
Mm-hmm.
And those are basically impossible to answer hypothetical questions.
Okay.
And so they're intended to kind of break down your sense of confidence. So before you read the material in the wisdom booklet, they ask you these questions that are like so grammatically ill-formed that they're almost impossible to understand
Mm-hmm.
and kind of just don't make sense, like true and false questions.
And then you just start doubting, like, am I even smart enough to read these questions?
Right, exactly. And so you do the wisdom quiz and you're like, fuck, I'm so dumb, I'm so evil, you know,
I
because it's
need
also,
this.
you know, it's not just, you know, sold to you as knowledge, it's sold to you as like the word of
Goodness.
God.
Yeah.
Goodness and the word of God and how to be, you know, close to God and a good person and all these things. And so it kind of breaks down, and so it breaks down your confidence. And so there's that abuse is kind of structured into the curriculum itself, in addition to the evil of the teachings, which
Mm-hmm.
encourage sexual abuse and rape, because Mr. Gothard is a sexual predator.
They're already horrifying. I can't believe there's more non-optionals.
What? There's freedom, which sounds nice at first.
Yeah.
But it's actually freedom from any kind of moral failings.
Mm-hmm.
So not listening to any rock music or popular music, not you know, watching television, not reading novels, you know, kind of not lusting after people. So it's success is like, freedom is freedom from sin, not
freedom from other society, not
right,
not actual freedom.
Right. It's also the isolation principle.
Yeah. It's that same thing that we're like, oh yeah, they all must be crazy because they're not doing the same thing. It's like, no, you're the crazy ones because you've never read a book.
Right. And there was like a, you know, like when the internet, I was kind of a teenager when the internet started becoming more popular,
Mm-hmm.
especially to people who are like rural Texas cult members.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a teaching in this, they added this thing to the success principle. Successful men don't use computers. And I was so
Of course
confused.
not.
I was so I was so confused by like why computers were suddenly the one thing women could do that men couldn't do. And it took me a long time to figure out that it was because of pornography, because I had
Oh
no
my
idea at the time
God.
what pornography even was.
Yeah, and they probably thought you were like too dumb to get there with your woman brain.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I've thought about this. I was talking to another comic who grew up Jehovah's Witness, and he was telling me that he's a little bit younger than I was, and he had access to the internet, and he was like looking things up, and suddenly was like, "These people are lying." But I never had that. Like, I never had that opportunity to figure that out because it wasn't really available at the
Yeah.
time.
Oh my God. No, it's like every day you find out Santa's not real, but it's like it's way worse. Okay, so freedom, and then the next one is
The next one is responsibility.
mm-hmm.
So basically everything that happens in your life, basically you're responsible for everything that happens in your life. So if you're being abused,
That's
that's
your
because
fault.
you stepped out from underneath your umbrella of authority. If you're lost your job, you stepped out from underneath your umbrella of authority.
Ugh.
Because nothing bad can happen to you if you're under
If
the
you were
umbrella.
right.
Yeah. And so this kind of was one of the big things I think that was really difficult for me psychologically after I left, was because, of course, lots of bad things happen to like 17-year-old girls with second grade
Totally.
educations, you know? And it was hard to kind of undo this idea that I was responsible for that, or that I had created that by disobeying or by leaving or by
Mm-hmm.
not following the rules.
Mm-hmm. Because every time you're like, oh, I split from them. That's why I am homeless right now. That's why I'm
Right.
not able to get a job right now. Like, and it, while you're actually saving yourself, your brain is still fixating on the things that you'd been taught before, and is leading you back eventually if you personally weren't strong enough to do that. I'm sure a lot of people do escape and then end up going back, either because they don't know enough, they can't like fend for themselves in the world, or that same thing of being like, I have to go back so bad things just stop happening to me.
Absolutely. And I think too, there's a lot of anxiety. One of the reasons I think people join cults is because it's easy to have everything decided for you.
Mm-hmm.
Life is complex and messy, and especially when we live in this increasingly globalized culture where we're constantly inundated with news about other places that we've never been to, and discourses that we're not a part of, and things that we can't understand, and nobody
Mm-hmm.
can understand all of the forces around them. There's a comfort in thinking, these decisions are already made for me. I don't have to do that myself. And so
Mm-hmm.
I struggle personally a lot with indecisiveness. Like, I get stressed out when I go to the grocery store
Mm-hmm.
about like making choices. Like,
Yep.
shopping really stresses me out, because it's like I'm being forced to make all of these little insignificant choices, and they sometimes feel like they take on this like huge kind of cosmological world ending importance, even though it's, yeah.
What if I make the wrong decision?
Mhm.
Yeah, no, there's things in a lot of systems like where it's like you don't even want to think about getting dressed in the morning. Okay, cool. Well, that's
Mhm.
prescribed by you from the church
Mhm.
or for
Right.
you.
Yeah, and how you dress, like,
Decision making can be so hard, but the ability to make decisions, and a lot of decisions, is amazing. Like, you would never want that taken away from you. And like, especially when it comes to creativity or whatever, like, you want to be able to make your decisions. What if you want to buy something? What if you want to customize something? Those are decisions that you can make and that you should be able to make. Right now, I am facing some pretty big decisions because it's the week before Christmas. I have to get some gifts for Ben's parents. And I don't know what I'm going to get because I'm so bad at decision making usually. But this year, I know what I'm going to do. I saw this hilarious trend on TikTok, which is like you wrap something in a shape of something that it's not. So, like, you take a shirt and then you wrap it in like the shape of a gun or something like that, or like a drill. And you wrap it in the shape of like a drill. So, like, something like that. Or like a guy put like a bunch of makeup and then he made it look like It was like a bench press. This other guy got like an Apple Watch, made it look like it was like a ladder, whatever. I know that Ray and Jane need a new sofa. They've been saying it, and Jane kind of said to me that she was like, yeah, I like really love that Allform one that we have. I'd love another one. So I am going to wrap a card as if it is a sofa, like a little sofa. And then when she unwraps it, it'll just be a card, and it'll be like, I owe you one Allform sofa. And then I'm just going to like put her on the website, and I'll be like, whatever you pick, whatever you like, I'm going to get you. If you don't know what an Allform sofa is already, come on, get on board. If you've heard this podcast, you've heard me talk about my Helix mattress, right? I love my Helix mattress. It's the best mattress in the world. So exciting news. Helix went beyond the bedroom and started making sofas. They launched a new company called Allform, and they make premium, customizable sofas and chairs shipped right to your door. I already got a love seat for Jane earlier this year. And what makes an Allform sofa really cool is it is the easiest way you can customize a sofa using premium materials or a chair. And it is at a fraction of the traditional costs. And you can pick out your fabric, which is spill, stain, and scratch resistant, the sofa color, the color of the legs, sofa size, and the shape to make sure it's perfect for you and your home. They've got armchairs, love seats, all the way up to 8-piece sectionals. So there's something for everyone, and you can always start small and buy more seats later if you want your Allform sofa to grow and change with you when you move. They're also delivered directly to your home with fast, free shipping. So like in the past, in college, when I got my sofa, it took like 3 weeks, or it could even take months to arrive. And you would need someone to come and assemble it in your home, like, and bring it up in the elevator and shit. No. Allform takes just 3 to 7 days to arrive in the mail, and you can assemble it yourself in just a few minutes. No tools needed. So yeah, we got the love seat, or the chaise, for Jane, in beige with light brown legs, and she picked it all out. And it arrived, and Ray was all pissed because he hates stuff that you have to build. And we were like, be quiet. And then we built it so fast that like he couldn't even like say anything. And then now he loves it, and he like sleeps in it. And yeah, they're amazing. And I can't wait to get them a new one for the holiday. So if getting a sofa without trying it in a store sounds a little risky to you, you don't need to worry. I totally get it. But you got 100 days to decide if you want to keep it. So that's more than 3 months. And if you don't love it, they'll pick it up for free, and they'll give you a full refund. So to find your perfect sofa, or something for someone else, maybe you're going to do a little IOU situation like me. Check out allform.com/howcome. Allform is offering 20% off all orders for our listeners at allform.com/howcome. So if you want a couch, or you want to get a couch for somebody else, allform.com/howcome. Also, if you don't want to make any decisions, but you want good decisions made for you. You want to make your body feel better. I have another thing for you. You might have heard me talk about them before because I'm obsessed with them. So Care Of is a wellness brand that makes it easy to maintain your health goals with a customized vitamin plan that helps you feel your best today and supports you long term. I love this because Care Of comes with a quiz, and you know I love a quiz. They have a 5-minute online quiz that's like getting a one-on-one consultation with a nutritionist, all without leaving your house. Perfect. You answer questions about your diet, your lifestyle, and your health concerns to help you address your specific wellness goals. From there, you get a personally tailored recommendations for your unique health needs. It's the perfect time to start taking care of yourself with all those holiday meals and sweet treats. Take care of your gut health with Care Of's probiotics. I have always wanted customized vitamins because I like to know about me and what's best for me specifically. So I took the quiz, and Care Of told me a lot of things that I didn't know about myself, and a lot of things that I did. One of them was like, you're low on iron. And I was like, I knew that. Why haven't I been doing anything about it? Because I don't know where to get iron pills, or like how much I'm supposed to get. Then I got some probiotics because gut health is important to me. I told them, I was like, I wake up nauseous a lot. And so I got that. And I have been loving them. It's like sometimes Ben takes my vitamins. I don't love that, but whatever. He can do it because I'll order more. And the cutest thing, this has nothing to do with health, but I just do like it. It makes me smile every morning. Is that on your packets, they're like customized. It's like says your name. So it's like, these are Remy's vitamins. You would think that would stop him from taking them. It does not. But yeah, that's one of my favorite things. And they keep you healthy and feeling good. And just, it's like one thing that you can like feel good about for the day that you're like, okay, I had a few donuts, but like I did have my vitamins. Go me. Small wins. So for 50% off, yes, that is 50, half. 50% off when you place your first Care Of order. Visit takecareof.com and use promo code HowCome50. That is 50% off your first Care Of order when you go to takecareof.com and enter HowCome50 at checkout. Woo! Okay. Now, we are entering back into the episode. I have to remind you what we were talking about was people liked being in cults because it absolved them of choosing things. Okay.
Yeah, and how you dress, like everybody had a daily schedule, like the mom had a schedule, dad has a schedule, kids have a schedule, and you're supposed to like follow that. It's created by Mr. Gothard. My family was kind of interesting in that we were somewhat hypocritical. So like my parents, they put us in the cult. They made us do the homeschool or baby do the homeschool program. They, insisted that I follow these rules for my life. But neither one of them were really following any of the rules on their own.
What?
So like my parents were secret. My mom would listen to rock music when she went for runs. And they used birth control, which was very, very forbidden. And so they would watch television at night after my brother and I went to sleep. And so I saw my parents kind of constantly flouting the rules, and this caused me just like tremendous anxiety because they were disobeying God. So like they're in my chain of command, right? So
they're
now
fucking you up.
Yeah, like now we're all out from under the umbrella, and I don't
it's like, why did you bring me into this type of thinking to think that like bad things are going to happen to me if we disobey, and you're my person that's disobeying and telling me what to do.
Yeah, so it caused me like tremendous amounts of anxiety. I remember like laying in bed at night like crying and begging God to forgive my parents and please don't curse us because they were watching Roseanne or listening to Billy Joel or something.
I mean, Roseanne deserves smiting for the whole family. Sorry, Brooke. No, and then I'm sorry. So you're just staying up and you're praying and you're like, please forgive them.
Yeah, because it just really frightened me, to be so. I think, that I don't think even to this day they've ever really understood that the difference that period in our lives had on my psyche versus them. Like they're already fully formed adults in their 30s. They went to high school and had friends, had normal experiences, and they don't understand what it was like to take me out of school at 7 and then keep me at home just with the wisdom booklets is the name of the homeschool program. Because wisdom is more important than knowledge.
Oh, cool. So, okay, we've done 5 principles, right?
I think we did all. We did design, authority, suffering, responsibility, ownership, freedom, success.
Success. What is success?
You're guaranteed success if you follow the other 6.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
Okay. So what was like a day in the life basically for you growing up? Like what were these schedules?
Well, like I said, we very rarely followed the actual schedules. So basically, my mom would wake up, she would go to the gym. My brother would go to work, and I would just stay home by myself in this trailer out in the middle of the fucking woods, 45 minutes from the nearest town. just like looking at the wisdom booklets,
Mm-hmm.
and I would finish my schoolwork or whatever. My parents were too cheap to even buy the answer keys, so I never knew if any of my answers were correct.
Oh, Brooke, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It was a long time ago now.
Oh my God.
So
That
I
is
just
so unnerving.
I just love to read, so I just read like every book I could get my hand on. I
Yeah.
read the entire like 1987 World Book Encyclopedia like multiple times.
Your little Matilda.
I would like steal books from the public library. I'm sorry, Brian, public library. I'll give you, when I'm rich, I'll send you a check someday. Because I didn't want to, like, my mom wouldn't let me take them out. So I would sneak them out, like in my Bible. I would like sneak them out and I would like put them inside my Bible cover and like read like forbidden books inside my Bible cover. But that was also very frightening too, because, again, that's disobedience. And so, but I kind of had this fuck it, we're all fucked. My parents have already fucked
They've already fucked me. Yeah.
They've already
They
fucked
keep
this up.
fucking me every day with Piano Man. I'm gonna read a book.
You imagine going to hell for Billy Joel?
Do I at least get Alexa Ray Joel too?
Yeah, so I think I have a hard time with ages because I didn't go to school. It's hard to mark off like I don't have any I don't have any like landmarks in my childhood. It was like, what did I do? I did the same thing every day for all of it, And so like I never really went anywhere or did anything, so it's hard. But I think I was probably like 14 or 15. And yeah, we went to this garage sale and I got a couple books, this college course book. And I read it like I would read a regular book. I just sat there and I read every single class and I would like make myself pick which classes I wanted to take and which, I had this really stupid idea that I was going to like study astrophysics, even though there's no math in the wisdom booklets. So that wasn't even ever going to be a possibility. But yeah, and so I kind of became obsessed with this idea of going to college, and there was pretty set idea that as soon as I would turn 18, I would be placed in a courtship with somebody in my church. And
like
those were
assign someone to marry?
Yeah, it was essentially an arranged marriage. The idea is that it's arranged by the two fathers.
Okay.
So the fathers reach out to each other, get a word from God. Like there was this man in our church who got a word from God that his daughter was supposed to marry my brother. And he showed up at our house one day and told us about it. It's really, really weird.
It's very strange.
And I was just like, this doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun to me. I don't really want to
show up
do
at your
this.
crush's house. Hi, I got a word from God, and we're supposed to get married.
It's like your dad going over to like your crush's house and being like, hey. It's just so creepy, everything about it. I just really started to really, want more out of my life, like getting educated and maybe having a job and living my own life. And so I tried to talk to my parents about it, and originally I kind of just said like, I kind of asked for, I didn't know what it was at the time, and I kind of asked for a rumspringa. I was like, can I just leave for like a year or two, go to college, maybe work for a year or two, and then I'll come back and I'll get married. Whoever you want.
Rumspringa is for Mormons, right?
I think it's Amish.
Oh, Amish people. Sorry.
Yeah, they leave.
Yeah. They get like
a
year to do them.
Yeah, then they all get addicted to meth, and then there's like meth dealers that just hang out in front of Amish settlements.
Oh,
so
God.
That it's not even a lie.
As soon as they are released, they are addicted to meth.
Yeah, it's like a huge social problem in the Amish community.
I'm sure. It's like how not that this is exactly the same, but like the drinking age is so late here, and so people just like go fucking nuts and like throw up their brains like the second they do it for the first time. Whereas like Robin's been getting little drinks since she was like 12 at the dinner table. She can go hard.
To get back to the college thing, one of the reasons Mr. Gothard was so vehemently anti-college is because the graduates of his homeschool program were supposed to come and work for him after they finish versus going to college. And so he really was against that, so he could basically get a free labor force. So at one time, he's got tens of thousands of, excuse me, he's got like tens of thousands of kids from his homeschool programs running all of his training centers. He had, I think, in the late 90s, they had like about 12, somewhere around 12 or 14 training centers in the US, and they had several overseas, like one in Australia, one in Singapore, one in the Philippines. And so he was, creating this huge force of free labor for himself, people who've been trained from birth to view him as God, to be instantly obedient to everything that they are told to do. And of course, he began sexually harassing and in some cases sexually assaulting some of the girls who came to work for him.
That's terrifying.
It's really, really deeply terrifying. And a lot of these girls were as young as 13, 14, very young girls. He would pick them. We had to go, like, every year, we called it Mecca. We had to go to Knoxville, Tennessee for our annual homeschool convention. And and I remember, like, one of the girls, Mr. Gothard said hi to one of my friends from church at one of those. And she just acted like it was the most we all thought it was the most amazing thing that had ever happened. Yeah, it was like Brad Pitt asked me on a date, because he was a god to us.
And you guys didn't have other celebrity culture because you were free from that. So he was like the only icon. So had you ever met him personally? Was that like a common thing?
It was pretty common. Since I never went to work at the training centers, I never did meet him personally. I met him personally a few times in the last couple of years, but not as a child.
You've met him recently?
Yeah. I called him and I went to his house.
What was that like?
It was really weird.
Why did you do that?
I don't know. I just wanted to.
Was it surrounding writing your show?
I was actually, he was in court for a hearing about the sex abuse lawsuit. And so, which was later dropped. And I went to Chicago to sit in, just to watch and get information, because it's part of my creative work in my life,
Yeah.
And so I went, but then it ended up, the hearing ended up getting postponed. And so I was in Chicago and was like, I don't have anything to do today. What should I do? And I thought, I'll just go to his house. And so I called him up and I said, can I come over? I grew up in your program. And I called him first. And I said, I grew up in your program. And he said, how lucky for you. And I said, can I come over? And I'd just like to say hi and meet you. And he said yes. And so I went over to his house. He lives in the same house he's lived in his entire life. He's 85, 86 now, I think.
What state?
Illinois is like the suburb of suburbs of Chicago. But like, yeah, so I called, I went over to his house. He lives in it's a modest little house. He's lived there his whole life. And I walked in his living room. I sat on the couch. We started talking, and I noticed that he had this like coffee stain on his tie. And I thought, wow, that's so strange. Like, he's like a person. Suddenly, any last vestiges of that kind of pedestal that he'd been on my whole life, was instantly erased in this moment of seeing like he's an actual person, who spills coffee on his fucking shirt like a loser, like I do, And suddenly he
Except
was
you're not a loser.
Oh no, I'm just joking.
No, I know. I'm just letting everybody know.
It kind of humanized him for me and kind of burst this bubble, and I realized how much power he'd been able to exert because because it wasn't like a localized group where you see that person every day. So he's able to kind of, he's this mythic kind of the Wizard
He's the
of
man
Oz
behind
head,
the
you know?
curtain. Yeah,
Exactly.
Wow.
And it was pretty wild. So I remember just like looking at that and just thinking like, oh wow, you know, he's an actual human being. He was really, really flirtatious with me.
Sure.
Like incredibly so. While I was there, he had this giant, you know, like all these boxes of self-published books in his house, and he told me I could pick out a few, and he autographed them for me. And then he asked me if he could pray over me, and I said yes. And so he said, I know what you want, young lady. And I said, what is that? And he said, a husband. And I was like, no. Wrong again, Mr. Gothard. Yeah, I told him, I didn't tell him that, but I didn't tell him that because I was trying to play the like, you know, I didn't want to be too controversial because I thought I wanted him to be kind of himself with me, and like, so I was just kind of very worshipful and respectful. I was wearing pants, so I knew he would know that like I wasn't completely still in the group, you know, but I didn't want to be too controversial. So he's like, let me pray over you so that you can get a husband. And so he starts praying, like what we'd like bow our heads and close our eyes. I hadn't prayed in such a long time. I just had this really uneasy feeling. And so I opened my eyes, and when I opened my eyes, I realized his eyes were open and he was just staring at me.
My God.
Our eyes met, and I think we both kind of in that moment knew we were playing each other.
Uh-huh. Oh!
And so I just bowed my head back down. I kind of like wiped my eye like that, like I just opened them because eyelash, you know.
Yeah.
All the makeup I don't wear is getting in my eye. Yeah. And so we just like finished the prayer. And, you know, as I was leaving, he says to me, like, do you like snacks? And I said, sure, yes. I mean, yeah. Says the man who made me fast once a day a week for my entire childhood.
Oh, my God.
So he asked me if I like snacks, and I said yes. And he walks over the kitchen counter, and there's this, like, giant box of, like, one of these, like, snack subscription boxes. It's just, like, giant box of, like, beef jerky and Skittles and Kit Kats and Werther's Originals, because he's 85, you know, just all of these.
Sure, yeah.
And he said, my friends send me snacks every week. And there was just something about the way he said it that it touched my heart in just such a deep way. And for the first time since I was a child, or ever maybe, I felt genuine empathy for him, compassion for him, because I realized that this guy is so insecure that he has to create a cult in order to convince himself that people like him. And he has to brainwash people into being fully obedient to him, to think that his ideas will be popular or accepted, or just the level of insecurity and self-hatred was so evident in his voice when he said, my friends send me snacks, you know. He sounded like a child. And it was just kind of a surprising moment. And in that moment, I let go of a lot of my anger towards him, and and kind of, you know, in a way saw him as a you know, hurt human being rather than just this either a god or a monster, which I had kind of been vacillating between
that black and white.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so is it tough for you then as an empathetic person to have those feelings? Because I sometimes will think of, you know, narcissists or people with cults of personality and I'd be so mad at them, but then also have this like pang of empathy and then be like, ugh, why am I empathizing with someone who still is hurting people, right? This man's not in jail. He still has people under him that are being indoctrinated, probably being sexually abused, probably being beaten by their parents. Like, he still is hurting people. So as as somebody who feel like, does that fuck you up a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know what the correct answer is to that. And it's something I struggle with because I do acknowledge that I was brainwashed to accept abuse, and I was brainwashed to excuse abuse. And so maybe what I think of as a compassionate moment is really just more indoctrination and more weakness and more,
I don't think it is. I don't think it's weakness. I think it's empathy.
you
I think
know,
there's such a difference between the two.
right.
Like, there is Brooke as a person, and whether she was in this thing or not, she would be an extremely empathetic person.
Right. But I don't know if it's that, or if forgiveness is a racket. I kind of I question the concept of forgiveness itself, because it's so often weaponized to excuse abuse and to excuse mistreatment. And especially within like the Christian church, the idea is that you're supposed to forgive people. Of course, that only ever applies to like people who've done really heinous things, usually against women or children. It very seldom applies to like the teenage girl who gets pregnant or the person who gets addicted to OxyContin.
No forgiveness for you.
Right, no forgiveness for those people, but forgiveness for the abusers. And so I do question that. I think that is a hard thing, and I go back and forth. I go back and forth about it a lot, whether forgiveness itself is another lie of religion that perhaps doesn't do us any real good.
I think you can forgive yourself. That's like the number one thing, is like, forgive yourself for believing those things, because you didn't do that.
Right, yeah.
And you weren't stupid for that. You literally were doing everything you fucking could. Got your hands on a college textbook. Were like, I'm going to go do this. And then we kind of like skipped around this part, but when you decided, I want to go to school, everyone was like, this is a demon. They weren't thinking, oh, this is something that she actually wants to do, because what you guys have been taught is that a woman who wants to learn must be, like, her body must be inhabited by the devil.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, to want something other than, what is God's plan for you is demonic, and that was a big thing that they did every year at the seminars in Knoxville. Sorry, I almost said Nashville, Knoxville. They would take aside all the women and put them like alone, and they would ask them, do you ever regret having so many children? Because no, birth control was a huge part of the teachings of the cult.
Especially when you're trying to make an army of slaves.
Right.
That's literally, nobody talks about that being a reason why abortion wasn't allowed. It's because the second people stopped being allowed to have actual slaves, they were like, okay, who's going to work the fields?
Right.
I'll make my mom, oh my God, I'll make my wife shoot out a bunch of kids. Or your mom, if you're in that kind of cult. I don't know.
Remy has her Oedipal cult coming up.
No, this is the Electra cult.
Boy, if it's for people with daddy issues, I'll be your treasury secretary, your treasurer, something like that.
No, there's a thing on TikTok. It's like the kids who have both, like daddy issues and mommy issues. Just like, oh, you're fucked.
You mean stand-up comics?
Yeah. So yeah, basically they exorcised you, right?
Right. So the idea was like you have a demon on you, and so like the pastor or the deacons came over and anointed my head with oil, and they all laid hands on me. And it's so creepy to be like a 13, 14-year-old girl, and all these men are holding hands on you and telling you that you're evil. I have a joke in my set about it's like the first time I was gang raped.
Yeah.
Because it's really creepy. It's a really creepy thing to happen. And so
and publicly, it's like is going on in front of like the whole community, or
no, just in our home, our private home.
Okay.
Yeah. Not that wasn't like something publicly. There was like a very real practice in our church of like public confessions, and so if you were committing some kind of sin, you would have to like get up in front of the church and admit it. But it was usually, that was only reserved for like sexual sins. So like if there was like one girl who got pregnant, and so she had to get up in front of the church and apologize to everybody for getting pregnant.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Then there was also a time like at the end of every service where you can like go up to the front and you can confess your sins to the pastor. And there was one kid who like went up every week, and I didn't know like what, I couldn't figure out why he would go up there every week. And I remember like riding home from church, my mom, and saying like, why do you think he goes to the front of the church every week and cries? And she's like, probably because he's masturbating. And I was like, what's masturbating? Because my parents instilled a lot of shame about masturbation into my brother, but they never even mentioned it to me. Like it never even occurred to them that I might want to do it.
How much older is he?
4.5 years.
Okay. And he obviously never spoke to you about it, or?
Not really, no.
Were you masturbating?
Sorta, kinda. Somewhat. I definitely had this, like, I definitely did some pillow
humping
and teddy bear, pillow and teddy bear humping, like, during that period, but I never touched myself, or anything like that. Because, I mean, that concept was so foreign to me, because like we don't really, the wisdom booklets don't have any kind of like mechanical we talked about sex in the cult constantly. It's based on the idea that it's part of the quiverful movement. So we talked about birth control. Mr. Gothard talked about sexual abuse constantly, rape constantly. He taught there's lots of rape in the Bible. I actually would challenge any listeners to tell me an instance of consensual sex within the Christian Bible. I have yet to be able to think of one. But I don't want to have to reread it. I don't want to have to reread it. So if you guys can help me out.
I'm going to ask John Fugelsang.
Okay.
You know him?
I do.
Yeah. He's like, his dad was like a minister. He knows all thing religious, but he's also like liberal as fuck. So he'll be able to tell us what's up.
Yeah, because I'd be curious about that. So like I heard about sex constantly. Like all we talked about, like I knew that a husband has to wait 90 days to have sex with his wife if she has a girl, and 120 days to have sex with his wife if it's a boy. Like I knew like these archaic Mr. Gothard.
Are those true facts? No, right?
It's just something that was taught. It's from the old. Yeah. It's from the Old Testament, and so that was like something that was very like practiced. So I knew all these things, but I didn't know what I had never heard the term orgasm. I had never heard the term masturbation. Like those just weren't things that were on in my purview whatsoever.
Do you think you ever orgasmed while still under, or did it take you until? Okay. Yeah.
Definitely not. I had my first orgasm about 1.5 years, 2 years after I left.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when you did leave, so we talked about the exorcisms, and then was that the thing that made you be like, I need to get out of here?
No, but it was definitely something, there wasn't really a single thing, I kind of describe it, I think the best way to describe it is like kind of being like trapped under this like frozen sheet of ice, and there's cracks coming up and cracks coming up and cracks coming up, and they kind of together form the thing that's allows you to escape, but there wasn't really any single thing. It was kind of I had the first kind of thought of doubt. I remember being in a car with my parents, and we're driving to the hospital to visit my grandfather, and my dad was just like blah blah blah, just talking about some kind of like minor doctrinal issue that no one cares about. And I remember thinking like, gosh, this guy has so many opinions. What's the likelihood that he's right about everything? And suddenly, like, just this is such a silly little thought to have. But I think was the first time I started to realize, like, I could actually question what's happening, And my parents, weren't the most stable financially or emotionally. They weren't very good to me. Basically, I was locked in, the house with them for my entire childhood, so I was, I didn't have there was no sense of boundaries. I knew who they were.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, I remember like being pretty young, and like they would do something stupid, and I would just like be like, I can't believe I have to put up with this for 10 more years. Like these people are in charge for 10 more years.
Mm-hmm.
So there was like that, there was all those kind of things kind of came together. But the exorcism and like the desire to go to college didn't change. And honestly, I was so resentful of it. If they had probably taken a lighter hand to me, I might have let that dream go.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also like it solidified their reaction to it solidified its importance to me.
Mm-hmm.
There's this in the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, there's this great section where he talks about his slave owner. He was the same age as the slave owner's child, and they started teaching, the slave owner's wife started teaching him and her son how to read at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And her husband was horrified by it, and he was like, can't teach a slave to read. And Frederick Douglass was like, well, if they don't want me to read, that's the most important thing I need to figure out how to do.
Yeah.
And when I read that as a teenager, I kind of realized, okay, everything that they're telling me they don't want me to do is because of control, and it's not because it's good for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started seeking out the things that I knew, I started seeking out the things that I had been told were bad.
Yeah. And especially if you're saying, like, I feel like you had never asked for anything your whole life, and this was the first thing that you were like, this is really important to me. And they were like, okay, no. And you were like, all right, now I know how you guys view things that are important to me. And it's not very highly. So I might as well get the fuck out of here. And you told a story that the man who was chosen for you to marry was not very attractive. So that made it easier to leave.
He was a nightmare.
Well, because you were like the bad girl, right? Like you were like the college wanting one. So you're not going to get one of the hottie boombalotties. You're going to get the dregs.
Yeah, there were no hottie boombalotties, let me tell you. No hottie boombalotties doing the wisdom booklets, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But just like, it just seemed like such a small life. And I wanted so much more, that life, this small life of being married off to someone I don't even choose at 18, never being allowed to use birth control, never being allowed to say no to sex with him, because that's a sin.
Yeah.
I just knew I would have a life of poverty and unhappiness. And there were a few girls in my church who had been, who were a little bit older than I was, and I saw things like one of my friends having 6 kids by the age of 24.
Yeah.
Which, like, can you even imagine? Or, the fact that this one girl who's quite a bit older than I was, like 6 or 7 years older than I was, she got married, had a bunch of kids, and then the guy was beating her, and then suddenly she's a single mom of 5 kids, and it's just, it's a kind of, and our church considered it very controversial that she left her husband even though he was beating her. And I just was like, I can't do this. There was just something in myself that was like, no, you deserve better than this. There's more than this. You can have more than this. But it has been somewhat disheartening. Like, since I left, I kind of left and thought I'd come into this amazing new place. And I've come to kind of realize that the things that I was taught exist on a spectrum with our larger culture, right? They're not, cults are created by the larger culture, and are a reflection of the culture. So it's like my cult was basically the most, a funhouse mirror for the patriarchy and rape culture, and authoritarianism that exists, in the larger American culture.
Yeah. Did you tell your family that you were leaving, or did you leave in the night? And if you told them, how did they react?
I did tell them I was leaving, because I got this, I did tell them I was leaving, and I was just kind of like, I had kind of been telling them, and they weren't really listening to me. And so my parents went out of town, and when they went out of town is like when I left.
And you were homeless for like 7 years, right?
I mean, off and on,
Off
you
and
know, like
on,
I couch surfed, I
Uh-huh.
crashed at people's house.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like straight up like living on the street, sleeping on the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like not having my
A
own
home
place,
base. Yeah.
yeah, not
Yeah.
having my own place, like yeah, because I had to kind of piece everything together, you know, like step by step. I had to get a driver's license. I had to get
Yeah.
my copy of my birth certificate, my social security card. I had to, excuse me, I was unqualified to even work at Walmart because I didn't have a high school diploma.
Uh-huh.
So I had to get a GED, you know, so it was a really kind of long, hard
Yeah.
slog out
Yeah.
of that. And it was really
Which
funny
is probably fucking intentional because they
Right,
don't
yeah.
want you to have other resources.
Right, absolutely.
So you'll have to come back.
And they, you know, and I think that one of the, you know, the things is, I think because my situation actually was so dire, it did help me in the long run because I was kind of stuck in this survival mode for
Mhm.
such a long time
Mhm.
that I really never had the opportunity to like sit down and be like, hey, that was fucked up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, what am I going to eat today? You know, and I was fortunate. I lived in a college town and I really good at talking my way into places. And so I would sleep in the library on campus. I could sneak into the cafeteria at least once every other day I made friends with the cashier lady and I would just be like, oh, I forgot my card. And she would let me in and I would just like fill my pockets with muffins and bananas and everything I could, you know, and I'd take showers at that gym, you know, the same trick. I forgot my card,
Yep.
you know, and they let you in. You know, it helped that I was like a cute girl that didn't hurt me at that point. You know, that was useful to me at that point. But I didn't have a lot of chance to like really kind of examine all of these, you know, how fucked up all of these things were. And I didn't really, I think, even realize how fucked up a lot of them were until the last couple of years. I started to realize certain things when I was in therapy. But then when I started speaking out about this, a woman reached out to me on Facebook she'd actually been the homeschool, Mr. Gothard's homeschool program has these family coordinators. And so it's like a regional person that's assigned to watch over the families and they come and do home checks, you know, make sure you don't have a TV and that you're following the principles. And they report back to Mr. Gothard. He had like elaborate files on all the families. And so one of these former family consultants reached out to me and she was like, hey, I've got tons of materials. They're sitting in my garage. I don't know what to do with them. And I said, mail them to me. And so she mailed them to me and they sat in my like apartment for like 3 months before I even like, I was so excited at first. I opened and I just saw the first thing. It was like this little booklet of a lion sitting on the, you know, like, on the top of a rock, and it's like how to stand alone. Which is basically how to be alone. But I was like, I can't deal with this, and so I put it back in. And then finally, a couple months later, I got them out and I started reading the materials. And I'll be honest with you, I think that fucked me up more than maybe anything. Or a lot of things, because what it did was it shifted my perspective on the program itself. I had kind of believed up until that point that the abuses that were happening were encouraged by some of the teachings rather than the teachings being created in order to create abuse, right? And so I realized that they weren't just wrong or really conservative or just super fundamentalist or just super sexist. I realized that there was an intentionality in the program. The program was set up by an abuser as kind of a pyramid scheme of abuse. You know, it's like Mr. Gothard sells the materials to the parents and the parents abuse their children. They send the children off to Mr. Gothard. He abuses them and they abuse their children. And it's just like a pyramid scheme of abuse. And that really fucked me up because I guess it was a level of evil that I just wasn't comfortable with. It kind of fundamentally changed the way that I saw human beings, and it kind of fundamentally changed the way I saw the world because I realized someone is willing to take children and brainwash them so that he can have free labor and access to like young girls. And just the amount of planning and intentionality and evil in that just really shook what I thought human beings were capable of.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started, thinking about things like, it occurred to me that like my parents had never read any of the homeschool curriculums that they gave me, and thinking about that level of neglect and that level of abuse. And then, learning that in Texas, where I grew up, the only requirement of a homeschool program is that it's written down.
What?
And so, yeah. So there's only 8 states in the United States that have any laws regulating homeschool. And that's because the Christian right has actually invested millions, tens of millions of dollars into
keep
court
their
case,
kids dumb.
Right, to keep their kids dumb and to keep homeschool from being as unregulated as possible. And there's really very little people can do, because there's a Supreme Court case from the 70s, Yoder versus Wisconsin, that was filed by an Amish family who didn't, at that point, it was illegal to not have your children in school. And this case changed that, because the Amish wanted a religious exemption from sending their children to the local public schools. And they won this Supreme Court case, and that's kind of been used as kind of a trickle down, let's get rid of any regulations around homeschool whatsoever. And so the vast majority of children who are being homeschooled, even outside of Mr. Gothard's cult, if they're not being sexually groomed, most of them are being, experiencing really severe educational neglect. I've had a lot of girls who are being currently homeschooled reach out to me since I've started speaking publicly about it. And I've talked to girls who believe that Donald Trump is the king of America, like the actual king, like a king, like not like president, and like the earth is flat, things like that, just like realizing that, that there's this isn't just like an oversight or something that people forgot about. This is something that people are actively creating in order to, I don't know, create some kind of sense of
value in themselves.
Value in themselves, right? So
and creating people dumber than you so you can feel smart.
Right? Yeah. It's so fun. It's so funny to me, because it's so inherently like anti-American, in the sense that, like, isn't America the place where your kids are supposed to do better than you? But this is like the group of people who are like, we don't want our children to do better than us, And there's a lot of really creepy, stuff that around in the Christian homeschool movement, that encourages child abuse. Books on how to get out of if Child Protective Services shows up to your house, how to get out of it. Like, we used to do plays where we'd have to rehearse what to do if Child Protective Services shows up.
Wow.
And so thinking about just like becoming aware of the levels of intentionality in it, like I said, it really just kind of shook my world. And all of that happening simultaneously with the Trump presidency and the Me Too movement. It was just kind of like a real head fuck for me.
Totally. Yeah, no, I'm the grooming aspect to it, like, kind of just throws me back to the Michael Jackson documentary, when he would tell them, like, this is what you do if your parents ask you about what we're doing. Like, you have to, like, the first steps of grooming are getting loyalty and secrecy to protect the person doing the thing.
And if you look at the timeline of accusations against Mr. Gothard, he's got 3 girls at any given time. He's got a current girl, a girl he's grooming, and a girl he's pushing out. And he would use them all against one another in order to make them all more interested in him.
That's what Michael Jackson did too. Did you watch his documentary?
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
He was like a fuckboy to the besides fucking them up for life. He also was like really rude as a boyfriend, and which
Applehead.
no, but it would just like start hooking up with someone younger and hotter and ignore them or whatever, and then start making them think that they had done something wrong or whatever, and like, yeah, it's all super fucked.
And I believe all women on principle.
Me too.
But
I believe all people. Anyone who comes to me and says that something happened to them, I am true. Yep, I believe you.
That's true. I do. I absolutely. That's absolutely true. But I guess, sometimes you just still have these like lingering doubts. And I remember one time I was doing some research, and I was looking up all the girls that were the 33 women who were in part of the sex abuse lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at all of them, and if you look at them side by side by side, they could all be sisters, cousins at most. They're like identical, like they all look exactly. He had an exact type of girl that he was picking out, and like as soon as I like started doing that, like any vestige of even like I didn't even think I doubted, but as soon as I saw that, then you realize too, like, wow, this isn't just like some girl came and like was working for him and he was like, oh, she's cute. It's
and she
like,
was just too sexy.
yeah,
and she wanted it too. She was in love with him too. I used to have those all the time too, where I'd be like, but what if it was a love story? It's not a love story.
Yeah,
this man set up an entire system to abuse young girls. That's what he did.
And it's terrifying. It's terrifying, you know. And I think it's a really interesting, you know, there's a lot of interesting parallels between the way Mr. Gothard set up his institute and the Epstein case. And the, I don't ever know how to say it, was it NXVIM or?
Nexium?
Nexium? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
I've never heard anyone pronounce it. I've only ever read it.
It's Nexium.
Like Epstein and Nexium, there's so many parallels. And so I guess that's kind of that's the way I see what I'm doing right now is, right. It's like figuring out like, who am I without having these, you know, voices kind of echo in my head, you know? And I've told, you know, my mom reaches out to me every so once in a while, and it's incredibly sad. I mean, there's no like day that I don't miss my mom. Like, come on, you know, you know, of course I do. But I've told her, look, you don't have to apologize to me for it. You just have to acknowledge that it hurt me, that it had a really negative impact on my life and my opportunities and my psychology. And just if you acknowledge that your decisions caused me pain, then maybe we can move, we can go forward. But they're unwilling to do that, you know.
And then you know what? Then you don't need more energy into that. And it's like you find the people who like you for you and like appreciate you, you know, like it's that old adage of like find your own family, because like not everybody's born into a family that's going to be good for them or going to support them, or a family that actually does abuse to them. And if they can't fess up that that's abuse, then they're not entitled to you.
Yeah, and so I mean that's very difficult, especially because, you know, growing up, you know, in a homeschool environment, like you spend so much time with your family.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't think there's a person on earth I've ever spent as much time with as I did my mom, because I spent all day, every day with her, you know, except when she would go to the gym for like long periods every morning. But, you know, but that's kind of like another, like, it's like, oh, it's like that's like kind of one phantom limb that you're left with. And then you're also left with, you know, kind of the never ending unpacking of all the psychological neuroses that have been created by the belief system, you know, because I think sometimes, you know, it's easy to think like, oh, I rejected God, I'm not a Christian anymore, or something like that, or I'm not in the cult anymore, I've rejected Mr. Gothard, I've rejected this. But what I think people don't realize, or I didn't realize, was that my psychology is still set up with that empty slot. And I've just spent the last 20 years putting a man or a woman or a alcohol bottle or a job or an accomplishment or something in that slot. This is the, you know, this is the thing outside myself that validates me. And this is the thing outside myself that makes me feel like I exist. And so kind of undoing that is something that I've tried to work on, but it's hard to do.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, we talk about unlearning on this podcast and just what like normal society has done to us as women, as people who like, I used to think you had to find a man to be sexually satisfied. You had to, you know, that's a lot of unlearning. And then you're compounded with stuff that is way more fucked up. And yeah, that must be incredibly tough to unpack.
Well, psychedelics have helped greatly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely been, I've been on a psychedelic journey for the past, since 2012. and daily meditation and psychedelics, I think, have been the biggest thing to me, because I eventually stopped going to therapy, and I don't know if this is the right choice for other people, but I felt like I kept putting the therapist in that Mr. Gothard slot.
Ooh.
And I was just, so it's like, what does she have to say about it? What does she think about it? What is, what I'm supposed to do?
Does she think I'm doing a good job this week?
Right. And so I was like, let me have a couple years without my parents, and let me have a couple years without that, and let me kind of tend to this mess myself and see if I can, because I don't want to rely on, I don't know if that makes sense, or if that's even a wise thing to do, but I felt like that, and so I kind of turned to like I said, meditation, psychedelics, and that's been a really, really, really positive thing.
That's one thing I was going to say before, when you were like, I've never spent any more time with anyone than I have my parents. Like, I think about this a lot. The most time you spend with somebody is with yourself. And we never, ever think about that time, because we don't think of it as valuable or whatever. But like alone time, thinking time, private time, when it's just like Brooke and Brooke and Brooke. And that's who's judging you. And that's who the person that we're trying to be the best for, like, instead of like doing it for somebody else. And like, yeah, that time is so important and like so valuable. And I know that we always talk about going to therapy and stuff, but I do think that's great. If you find yourself just wanting to like get an A in therapy, like, you're not going for the right reasons. You're going to get approval and validation again. And like, that is something that you step back and you meditate. And yeah, I love that. And I think you're just such a champion for like getting out from under impossible shit. Like, you started as one of the most uneducated people I've ever met in my life. And you are a college professor right now. Like, for people listening to this, like, think about that. Like, if you think something is fucking impossible, look at Brooke, who was in Occult and now grades people on knowledge and now speaks to people about what it's like to be an independent person. And like, your job, We Are Stand-Up Comics, is talking about our beliefs and that being important. You went from listening to somebody else's beliefs to being somebody who tells your, like, that is so incredible.
But it's hard. And like, one of the things I've loved about, well, first off, thank you for saying that. It's really kind, but it's really hard. It's really hard too. Cause like, I didn't realize that's like a whole nother thing. Like, when I started doing stand up, I felt like this is vanity. This is pride. Why should people listen to me? And then I also like have, like, when people write me like letters about like, oh, Brooke, you're so great. I heard you on this and you were so great. I feel like, am I Mr. Gothard now? Am I gonna be a cult leader? Like, am I the cult leader now? And like, that kind of, that feels scary.
Yeah, no, people who have imposter syndrome are not imposters. They don't have those thoughts. People who are sociopaths don't think about if they're sociopaths. People who are narcissists don't question whether they're narcissists. Can I keep you for a little longer?
You may.
Okay. Robin wrote this one, and I think it's a good question.
Looking at you, Robin.
Are there any aspects about cult life that you miss?
Oh, wow. That's a great question.
Right?
Yeah.
Made me nervous to ask it.
I guess I maybe the confidence in the like having a confidence in like your cosmology of the world, right? So I'm pretty, my beliefs now are pretty radical because I've done a lot of psychedelics.
Brooke walks into a room and it's just like incense and peppermint.
It's like, they're very healing, but they really kind of, they could be very a little weird too. But I think I miss having that confidence because I've tried to figure out like an alternative like worldview, like a parallel structure that I could come up with.
Higher power stuff.
Yeah, higher power, or just what do you believe what do you believe about the universe? I find scientific materialism to be very dry and uninteresting. I don't want to be the descendant of monkeys on a ball in space,
Yeah,
random
yeah.
ball in space. That just doesn't sound. It's not all that fun.
Yeah, I
It's
want
not
a purpose.
you know, I kind of like a purpose or like something a little bit more. So I do miss that idea of like I'm part of this larger purpose, you know, because the intended goal of the cult, right, was to create an army large enough to take over the United States, right, and turn it back into the Christian theocracy the founding fathers intended it to be.
Yeehaw.
You know, and so there is a comfort in that, and so I do miss that. I do kind of miss that, and there's a feeling that comes with like I'm really special. I'm part of this special group. I'm part of this. I have this special knowledge.
I was going to say you're a chosen one, but that's us.
Yeah.
That's my people.
Yeah, but it's kind of the same deal, you know. And so you're kind of I'm chosen by God. Like I'm one of the special ones.
And I'm part of this thing that has like a track and a reason.
Right. A trajectory and a reason and a purpose. And like you don't have to figure out what are you going to do every day, because everything is kind of like laid out for you. And I do miss that, I guess. And that's something I've struggled with, is trying to come up with or figure out what is it that I do actually believe about the world, because I feel pretty agnostic about that at this point.
I do too. If you ever want to talk about existential shit, that's all my head spins all day about. Why and what. And what the fuck are we doing here? Like,
I think as we become more and more aware of how much the people in power abuse their power, and how much historically we've been lied to about so many things from the Catholic Church, you know, the Catholic Church changing history and lying about history and changing the fundamental beliefs of Christianity to reflect this really small version of it. And then, you know, corporations lying to us. I think that, you know, advertising lying to us, and, you know, how many narcissists and abusers are in power. I think that there's a real sense of like insecurity about what is this? What are we doing here? You know? And I guess if you're, you know, you hitch your wagon to Mr. Gothard, you're like, well, at least the narcissist can't get me because I'm like riding. I'm in this narcissist float, you know?
I guess is it a cult or new religious movement? I don't think we have time to go through it, but basically decide for yourself whether it's a cult or religious movement or whatever. What makes a cult has certain things, if you need to look out for them: a charismatic leader, a transcendent belief system. Most religions and even political groups are going to have a transcendent belief system, meaning that they're stating how to get some better place.
Where did you get this transcendent belief system thing? Because I think that's very interesting.
Tennissean.com. 3, systems of control. They think they're joining something that's going to give them purpose or meaning. Purpose. And their systems of influence. Then there's more subtle influences, which is peer pressure. Other people in the group are making you do stuff. Older members will model for new members and how they're supposed to behave. And before you know it, you're so enveloped in this other reality that you don't look to anything else. Often, like we were talking about adults who join cults, they're people who are in bad stages of life. They don't have a purpose for themselves. They are gullible. They will be susceptible. I mean, Hitler's entire rise to power was because people didn't have jobs and they didn't have meaning. And so he was like, I'm offering you salvation through killing Jews. Woohoo! But that type of thing. So if you feel that you might be susceptible to cultish behavior, reach out to me. How about that? And we will help you, because sometimes if you don't have friends in your life, or if those friends are on the same path, they're not really going to be helpful. So reach out to us. We are here for you. And yeah, getting out of those situations, very important. They take time. If you're currently in one, don't feel guilty. Don't feel like you have been duped or whatever. Like, it is not your fucking fault. You are not going too slowly if you haven't been able to escape. Everything takes its time, and hopefully you can get to the place where you realize that you are important and that you have a purpose, and you don't even need to know what that purpose is. You're just a great person, and you're here for a reason. And I think that all of our purposes, if I may, is to enjoy life and pleasure. And ultimate pleasure is coming. So, Brooke, please tell me at this point that you are able to give yourself some goddamn pleasure.
Yeah, like what I think I was like 19ish. I had been out for like 2 years, and my friend Jason invited me to go to San Antonio with him, and we went to San Antonio, like drove up there, and they was like one of those giant 24-hour adult mega stores, like a porn store like the size of a freaking Walmart, you know, just enormous. And I had never been, and he's like, let's go. He's like, do you mind if we stop just like while we're here? Because I need to get some things. And my heart was like palpitating because I'd never been inside a porn store before. I didn't really even know I didn't like, you kind of know, but you don't know, it's just like, you never seen it. And so I went in and we're like going around and I saw a vibrator on the wall and I was just like, I'm going to buy one of these. And I bought a vibrator and I had no idea what to do with it. And I was too nervous to stick it inside of myself. So I just kind of like hovered it over my clit. Like, this isn't too sinful. If it doesn't go inside, it's not as sinful.
Yeah.
And I was like lying on the floor I was living in this really shitty apartment with my coworker Christina. We didn't have any furniture. We had one inflatable couch and then nothing else. It was the only piece of furniture, piece of anything in the apartment. So I was like laying on the floor in my room. I turned the vibrator on for the first time. And I came, I think, like pretty quickly, actually.
Yeah, you're what we call a garden hose that had been pinched.
Oh, dude! And speaking of garden hose, this is the really embarrassing part. Is when I came, I just wet the floor.
Hell yeah!
I just peed. I just peed everywhere, and I was like, "What did I do? Did I poke a hole in my bladder? Like I couldn't figure out like what the fuck it was."
It's squirt, Brooke. You squirted.
I think I peed.
A lot of people think that. It's not, I mean, if you peed, then that's fine too. But I'm pretty sure you squirted.
There was a lot of pent-up tension.
Oh my God. Well, I'm so happy that we finally got to have you on this podcast, and I'm sure our listeners will have additional questions for you. If that's the case, would you be willing to come back on Patreon for some follow-up?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Well, Brooke, tell me and our listeners where they can find you on the internet, follow you.
Okay.
Love you.
So I am in the next couple of weeks. I am launching a YouTube show, the Brooke Arnold Show. I'd love you to come on, Remy.
Oh my God, I would love to.
Yeah, we're gonna launch a little YouTube show, and also I have a Patreon. So if you want to subscribe to me on YouTube, you'll get a notification when the first episode comes out. And then,
awesome.
If you'd like to have access to my private weekly audio diaries, you can do so by subscribing to my Patreon. There'll also be bonus content from the YouTube once we have that worked out. And
your Instagram handle
is? Brooke Arnold.
And are you on Twitter?
I am at Brooke_Arnold.
Fantastic. You guys, speaking of Instagram and Twitter.
Instagram's doing some, oh no, my Zoom just died. It's okay. It'll save it, but whatever. I'll just have to do it on this audio. Instagram is doing this weird thing where they're shutting down sex worker accounts and sex podcast accounts and anything having to do with trying to teach you how to love yourself. So in the next few weeks, if you're not already following How Come Podcast, follow us, but follow me, Remy Casimir, as a backup too, just in case How Come gets shut down. We would like to keep in touch with you and all that good stuff. Of course, we have a Patreon. If you want to see Brooke and I in the dark for this episode, patreon.com/howcome. And yeah, Brooke, this has been a great episode. Brooke has a little orb of light in her hand.
It's like all my lights are off in my apartment.
Brooke, thank you so much for doing this. I do have to ask you this question. I have to ask all of our guests after, and anybody after a sexual experience. Brooke Arnold, did you finish?
I'm gonna finish when I get my boxes in the mail.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. I'll ask you what you prefer after, but I'm excited to send you some shit. All right. So I finished. Thank you so much for coming. And we'll see you next time on How Come. Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
It's not you, it's me. I try so hard to finish honestly. They say you'll know when you go all the way from A right down to O. Oh no, I think that I still got a ways to go. Oh, I'm sick of this and I have got to know. How come? How come? How come I can't achieve? How come I can't achieve? I'm rolling up my sleeves. I'm rolling up my sleeves. Oh baby, I believe these guests can help. 'Cause I can't do it by myself. I wanna just